We are doing a bit of a trading 101 class with Diana Perkins today to learn how to manage our risk while investing in the stock market. The world of finance is so male dominated and it can feel really intimidating, like everybody is speaking another language. And Diana has a fantastic way of simplifying the trading world and making it easy to understand. She is going to bust a lot of the misconceptions that prevent people from getting started in the markets. So, Diana is a seasoned CPA with decades of experience in public accounting, global strategy consulting, and trading equities and options, managing multi-million dollar portfolios. And she's now started Trading with Diana, a little gem of a resource to make financial education accessible for everyday people, particularly women, and help us navigate the world of trading and invest with confidence to achieve financial success. Oh, I am so excited for us to learn today. So let's get the skinny from Diana Perkins. Oh, Diana, I am so excited to dive in with you about all things trading because you are just empowering so many women with their financial literacy and independence and all of this information about how powerful the trading market is. So I want to ask you about your money template, about how this interest and this ability to work with money came about for you. Were your parents into trading? Were they really good with money, or is this something that just came to you on your own?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think a lot of people, I think part of it's being female, they wonder how do you get into finance? Because historically it's always been so male dominated. And the truth is, I don't have anyone who's finance in my family or even my friends circle. Some of the husbands, yes. I just knew from a young age this was my calling. When I was 8 years old, my mom took me, it was Bank One at the time, to open my first savings account. And she told me, just observe, you don't need to say anything. And that day I learned what compound interest was. And so a year later, when I was 9 years old, I was charging my sister interest on $5 loans. And she would say, Diana, you're such a dork. And maybe I was, but I received $5.50 at the end of the week on my $5
Well,
loan.
gosh, I hope she got a bit of a deal being a relative.
The sister discount. Yeah. So I always knew. I always loved numbers. It's the perfect science. It just made sense to me. But I learned because there wasn't really anyone who was, financy in my circle that it was unusual. And most people, they don't have that connection to money or numbers. But for me, I knew it was my calling from a
Yeah, so
very
it
early.
just made sense to you. Okay, so from 8 years old, what's the next it has to be me? Like, were you continually looking into things as a teenager, even before you went to college?
Yeah, yes. Gosh, I would say probably the next time. So every summer, our family would spend on the Jersey Shore betting on the horses at Monmouth Racetrack. And so I think that's where, a little bit of the gambling, right? I was a professional trader at one point, but I think,
Yeah.
that was, part of the excitement. But I was always very calculated even then with my money, how much, my position sizing will say, how much I bet, how much I retained. And so that was probably in my like 10 to 12 years old. And then later, when I was negotiating my first car loan, when I was 18 years old, again, I was with my mom. This time I did have to talk. And I knew, through college, my parents were going to take care of the payments, but I knew those payments would be my responsibility when I
Yeah.
graduated. So I was responsible for negotiating what I thought I could afford. So I always do my due diligence. I, did my research in advance. I knew what my numbers were for down payment and monthly payment. And when I went to get the car, I found the exact car that I wanted. Well, the first car that I wanted was a Volkswagen Jetta, and it was brand
Oh, that
new.
was my first
Oh,
car.
you're kidding! You're kidding!
Seriously. I had a black VW Jetta when I was in Los Angeles. It was my first car.
I love. I did get a Passat later on, but I
Yeah,
didn't.
they're great too.
I didn't get the Jetta that day because I couldn't afford it, and it was a new lease, and I knew I couldn't. Months before, my sister had the Beetle. And so the sales guy, he thought this was a done deal. So I came in, he's like, great, easy sale. And I told him, I let him down easy. I said, I feel like I'm breaking up with you, but I know you can't negotiate. It's a new, car loan. So we went to another place. And then that's where I found the car that I eventually bought.
Yeah.
And what happened there was it was a certified used vehicle. It was an SUV, but I knew it was slightly out of my price range. So, and I know you never accept the first offer. So I had the sales guy go back to his manager, come back, go through the motions. And he came back with another figure. And I asked him for a calculator. And he looked a little confused, gave me a calculator and a pen and paper. And I told him that given the time value of money with a 12% discount rate, which is actually pretty high, that the second offer he came to me with actually put me worse off than the first offer and he needed to do better.
Whoa.
And he got a little frustrated again, I think.
Because you knew what you were talking about.
Yes, I did. Because in my college courses, I had learned about the time value of money and how to calculate that. And to me, it's just so pragmatic and so practical, and the numbers don't lie. And he was a little frustrated because I think he had underestimated me,
Of
18-year-old
course.
Diana. I understand that. And then he asked me, well, what do you want? I said, I need the monthly payments it was around $300. I told him what my down payment needed to be. And then he came back. The monthly was $314.75. I signed the line and I had the car. So it's just a neat.
So that was just an empowering template for negotiating on your own behalf. So take me into the it has to be me, where you then began negotiating, working things out on behalf of all of these huge companies. I mean, what was that? That it has to be me working in a very male dominated environment going, yeah, I got the goods. I got the goods to do this.
Yeah, so I never questioned myself in business. My mother, businesswoman, retired from consulting 35 years. And I always just put my best foot forward. I do. I enjoy working. I like the thrill of it. I'm very competitive. I pick up things pretty quickly. And I mean, I was on fire at the start of my career. I had every company I worked for, I had male mentor, at least one male mentor, male executive who taught me along the way, took me under his wing. However,
Ooh.
a little bit later in my career, when I entered the finance realm, I encountered something I hadn't before. And I think it's something that a lot of women in business encounter, especially in the finance field. For the first time, I was told things like, your greatest assets are your blank and your blank. When you walk into a room, you have to prove yourself, and we don't. You'll never be leadership because you're female, and what's said about you is so crude. So I think
And so these things were actually verbalized to you
yeah,
by your male colleagues and mentors.
by executives within the firm. Yes,
Wow.
yes.
And I just have to ask you, what was the blank and blank? Just give me an example of you're this and you're that. You said blank and blank. I'd kind
Oh,
of like to know, if it's okay with you, what
yeah.
some of these specifics were. I mean, it's not surprising, but it's still vexing.
They're physical assets. It wasn't my mind, we'll say.
Whoa.
Yes.
Wow. Okay, so how did you receive that?
So I think the comment that struck me the most was when I walk into a room, I have to prove myself, and they don't.
Mm.
Because I had never thought of that before. I've never thought of myself in the business world as, male, female. I just knew I was, heavy at it and I was talented. I went out, after it. I had some great opportunities. I never thought about that perception. And I learned fairly early on in business that perception's reality and that you either take control or you get out. And this is kind of what I learned through that process. And I knew I had a decision because I woke up the next day thinking, wow, I feel like I have this handicap that everyone can see that I can't. And so I thought, well, do I, internalize that and that's, who I become, and or do I just continue, ignorance is bliss and just continue the way I had? And I chose the latter. And I've done that many times in my career, personal life. You just like you persevere, like you keep going. You don't let comments like that, and I don't care who it comes from, slow you down because you know who you are and you know your worth. And it's not easy, but that's you just have to.
So take me into the next it has to be me where you, well, it does not have to be me anymore moment where you left that particular finance container
Mhm.
where you were in that soup, so to speak, if that's an appropriate way to say it, and you decided to go out on your own. Take me into that. It has to be me to leave this and go and do it my way on my terms.
Yes, yes. So I knew from a fairly young age that I wanted to go into trading. Like I just,
Mm.
so finance 401, Dr. Marshall, junior in college, I learned we had a virtual stock exchange program. I was obsessed. I learned what a call and a put was. I knew that's what I wanted to do. But just like you said, I wanted to do it on my own terms. And there was floor trading at the time. I'm 5'2". I'm female. I thought no one's gonna fill my orders, and I'm not gonna let that happen. So in my mind, I had this set amount of money. Said I'll get my my CPA. I'll join corporates. I didn't know I was going to encounter that, but I'll join
Yeah.
wide eye. I'll join corporate and I'll save up X amount of money, and then someday I'm going to go on my own. And I did that, 10 years into corporate, and that's where I learned how to trade the markets. So that was the first time, and it was my passion. And I had a chance to work with hundreds and hundreds of aspiring professional traders in a mentoring capacity. I was trading three accounts. I was on fire. And I knew this is what I wanted to do, but through that experience, through corporate, I started to learn about that perception, and I started to feel like a little stagnant where I was, and I knew at that point I'm going to trade until the day I die. Like nothing's going to change that. But I ended up leaving that firm, and that's when I started working on the assets for what would become Trading with Diana, which is my business, but years later. And so heads down, I started, building a website. But I think some of those comments that I had heard through the career, they chiseled at my confidence, which I never really had an issue with that, but I did then. And I had to build that back up. So I signed up for, the toughest test on Wall Street, which is the CFA. And, I took that. I started looking at management consulting roles, technology product manager roles, audit roles, like all these other hats I had worn through my corporate career. But I knew trading is what I wanted to do. So I started writing these blog posts and creating social media accounts. And at the end of that year, I got cold feet and I didn't launch. Like I never launched. I eventually did, but I didn't then because I felt I didn't have enough money. And so instead I went back to corporate and management consulting, and that's where I was negotiating, these big, multi-million dollar deals and doing a lot of client work. It was interesting, it was fascinating, but it wasn't my passion, and I knew I had to get back to that.
So how did you build your confidence up again and come back full circle and return to this thing that you knew you had to do? How did you build it up again and finally go, it has to be me?
So I think so there were a lot of moving pieces at that time. I mean, I think the CFA exam, it helped a little bit because I was, high percentile, that was one thing. But I think the biggest thing is during that process, I interviewed with so many different types of companies because of the breadth of skill set. And when you're interviewing, you're putting your best foot forward, right? You're selling yourself. But I believed it. I knew no matter what happened, I would always have my resume to fall back on. And I think it was through that process of telling that, that story and my experience, it reminded me of how hard I worked, how much I had accomplished, and no one can take that away from you. And then I realized that's the foundation that I built, and nothing is going to break that no matter what happens moving forward. And that gave me the courage to leave corporate, for good.
So, what did that feel like when you finally listened to your full bodied yes and gave yourself permission to go after your it has to be me?
Yeah. So I will say, I mean, at first it's scary, right?
Yeah, and exciting.
Because when you need to act on something and make a change that's big. I mean, it's a career that I had worked 20 years towards. It was my dream at 22. But what I realized is at 42, sometimes those dreams don't hold. Like sometimes they change. And during that time, I mean, I was working, it was my dream. I was working for one of the largest international management consulting firms, really smart people, really interesting work, 14 to sometimes 20-hour days. It was intense. And at that time, I also had an opportunity with one of the world's largest wealth managers. I was thinking, like, I knew this was my passion in trading, and I was getting ready to step through that door, but there was a caveat, which was there would be restrictions on my trading because it would be considered a conflict of interest. And that was a deal breaker. I knew I couldn't step through that door. I had an investment group local here in Boston. I was trading on my own. And that's why I decided, like, I'm just going to do it. And I walked away from that opportunity. I put in 2 weeks at my dream company. I left. I had a personal relationship. I actually ended up leaving him as well. I mean, I think it was like burning down the house to build your castle is what it turned into.
Ooh, I like that phrase. Yeah.
Yes.
And so often we talk about this in the podcast a lot where no means saying yes to
Mm.
something that's the right fit at the time, and that can keep changing.
Yes. Well, that's another thing I learned early on. You're defined by what you say no to.
Ooh,
And
yes.
right, you're defined by what you say no to. And I'll admit I'm more of a yes person, or will, find a middle ground, want to make it work. Where there's a will, there's a way. But at that point in my life, I just knew I needed to make a change. And what I've learned from experience, and I've seen this in others as well, like you know when you're ready. I think the big decisions in life, whether it's where you live, your relationships, your career, like you just know. And oftentimes you don't, or maybe very few times, you regret making the change. What you regret is not making it sooner.
Yes.
Hmm.
Absolutely. I can certainly relate to that in my life where you go, oh gosh, I was so afraid of this change. And it ended up just opening up all these doors for me. And it comes with a myriad of emotions, but I say this a lot in my coaching that, fear and excitement activate in the same place in the body. It's just a different expectation of the outcome. With fear, we believe that it's going to be bad for us, destroy us, hurt us, be terrible. With excitement, we buy into the belief that it's going to serve us. So I just love that you went for it and that you then started helping other women, through your groups and the one-on-one coaching and all of the great downloads, which we'll put in the show notes because there's so many great resources. So I want to dive in with you and get some tangible tools from you because you just have so many. It's just so exciting. I first of all want to ask you why financial literacy matters, why it's so important for women.
Yes. So, I mean, great question. So, whether we like it or not, I mean, money, it's at the center of like the world we live in, right? It's going to affect us in some way or another. And we don't want to live our lives, being worried about debts or, paycheck, paycheck to paycheck, if we can help it. And we want to be in control of our finances because equivalent with freedom, with power, all of these things. And I feel that women have been left out of the conversation for a long time. This is something that I didn't realize until I think later in my life, where I started to talk to women about money and hearing those limiting beliefs. Look, when I first wanted to launch, I had the same, actually, I had the same limiting belief. I don't have enough money, right? But you
Yeah.
start where you are with what you have. And that's what, like, anyone needs to remember who wants to take that leap or wants to start, investing on their own or taking control of their financial futures. It's got to be like this abundance mentality around money because it is there. And with women, it was suggested to me when I left corporate the first time to learn how to trade. Why don't you work with women? Because you're a woman. And I remember at that time, and looking back, it was short sighted. I thought, well, finance is for everyone. Why would I just work with women? But then subsequently, I went through some of those experiences I shared and some of the things I was told, and I learned of that false perception, and it kind of like lit this fire in me. And I work with men and women, but I have this, men are reaching out to me, and I'm reaching out to women. Like, I want to reach those who feel that they can't do it, that they're intimidated by the markets. They don't know where to start because there's this facade around the stock markets. And I want to like pierce that and reach those who feel they can't do it and let them know they can. You don't have to be, a finance person like me charging interest when you're a kid. You can,
Well, thank goodness, because I wouldn't be in the stock market then, because I wasn't doing that as a kid. It's so inspiring. You talked about the limiting beliefs. What are some of the other limiting beliefs that you've seen with women around money and around their money template besides, I don't have enough money?
Mhm. Yep. So, well, that's a big one. I don't have enough money to start. One is, it's a man's world. I don't belong. Maybe they're in a partnership and their partner, they manage the finances. Maybe it's been, they've been told, messages there. It could even just be, just growing up, because it is mostly men in the markets. 85% of financial managers are male. 98% of hedge fund managers are male. It's and that's what you see, and you can internalize. So I would say it's capital. It's for men. I need a finance degree to get into the markets in a responsible way because it's too complex. It's too complex. I'll never understand it. And they're all falsities. Or, men are better investors. There are actually studies from Robinhood, from Fidelity, that show and support that women are actually better investors. And it has to do with strategy, with risk management around what's called diversification. They say, risk aversion. People love to think that, about women. I mean, I bet it all on black. I had a very lucrative career, and I'm also a CPA. I'm an accountant by trade. Sure, there's risk aversion, but it doesn't mean that you can't take that leap and you can't jump in.
So I want to ask you some trading for beginners 101 questions, if I may. If we have never traded before in our lives and we have this little bit of money, but we know we can get started because of what we learned from you, what do we do?
So, great question. I get this question a lot. So, first thing you want to do is you're going to place your trades in what's called a brokerage account. So, if you don't have a brokerage account, that's the first thing you're going to want to do. And it's less intimidating than it sounds. Many wealth managers, say you're with Charles Schwab, Fidelity, Morgan Stanley, a lot of those wealth managers, they have brokerage accounts that you can open, along with still maintaining those wealth management services. So Morgan Stanley has E-Trade, for example. Charles Schwab, they have Thinkorswim. So maybe start, with the wealth manager you have. There's some great platforms for beginners, like E-Trade, Fidelity. Has a great platform that's easy to navigate. But that's the first thing you're going to want to do is pick a brokerage account where you can place your trades. Um, The next thing that you'll want to do is decide. Sometimes for some people this is fun, some people not, but decide how much money you're willing to invest or you want to invest. And I always say my number one rule in trading is don't trade anything you can't afford to lose, right? Because when you start trading,
Yes.
you're going to be new. I know I've placed trades backwards. I remember one time I actually made money on that trade, so it worked out in my favor. But we're all going to make mistakes. And when you start trading, it's the worst trader you'll be. So start small, but think about how much you're willing to invest. So that's number two. And then the third thing you want to do is put a strategy together, and it doesn't need to be complex. It can simply be I'm going to, if you're actively trading, I'm going to trade these hours when the markets are open, or I'm going to invest, maybe it's just once a year, once a quarter, and I'm going to invest this much. And I'm going to focus on the technology and retail sectors because that's what I know and that's what I feel comfortable with. Or I'm going to put it in what's called an index fund because it automatically diversifies my portfolio and I can just set it and forget it. So, whatever that looks like for you, whether you want to just let it ride or actively manage your account, write that down because you'll want to go back to that once you start trading. Because what happens is you'll start to see your account balance move up and down, and you might want to trade what we call emotionally, kind of fear and greed if you're new to it, right? Because it'll feel a little uneasy at first, and that's normal. So open a brokerage account, figure out how much do I want to invest, put a plan together, and then the next thing I would say is, and this is one of the most important things you can do in trading, because there is risk, right? There is risk in the markets, risk and return, right? The balance. You'll want to manage your risk on your positions, and you can do that by investing in different sectors, different stocks. You can do what's called a protective stop. So there's different orders that you can place, and it takes you out of the trade at a small loss, and you don't even need to monitor it. So there are all these techniques and things. Get to that another time. But to get started in and of itself, it's actually fairly simple, and you don't need a lot of money to get started. Most of these online brokerages I mentioned, $0 account minimums. There's a man in my building. He has $7 invested in Nike, which is trading, I think, around 146 right now. You can trade what's called fractional shares. He has a piece of that share, right?
Wow. Yeah.
So you don't need a lot of money. Since 2019, thanks to Robinhood, you can place trades on stocks and what's called ETFs, exchange traded funds, but you can place those trades $0 commissions. When I started trading, I had to pay it was $6 each way, so $12 every time I wanted to trade, and that eats into your profits pretty quickly. So it's such a low barrier to entry. You don't need a lot of money. There are so many great options for online brokerages. It's just overcoming that fear and getting started. Because the fact is, the markets, that's where the money is, and you want to be
Yeah. And I can really see the value in your newsletter, in your blog posts, in your membership, in your mentoring groups. And because as I'm hearing you speak, I'm going, okay, so I want to get started, but I don't know what to invest in. I mean, I can read some stuff and I can, go with my gut, so to speak, and say, I want to invest in these kind of companies that have the same, philosophical beliefs or the same ethos, as me, and things that I feel good in supporting and helping grow or being a part of, owning a piece of. But beyond that, I don't really know what I'm doing. Right. So in your groups and in, all of the things that you help women with, that piece where you're constantly looking at the market and advising people on what you think are good investments, how do you put that together? Where you're going to put that out to your community every week?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So there are a few things. One, through my workshops, building wealth with confidence was the last workshop that I taught, and with there, I share some investment ideas for beginners right in the workshop, so you have something actionable. Now, every week, to your point, I do send out weekly stock picks, and there's always an educational component. So it's Monday morning before the market opens. It's stock picks. It's the entry, the exit. It's a trading tip of the week. It's watch list picks. It's market outlook. It's very comprehensive, and I practice what I preach. So exactly what I teach in my coaching is the methodology that I use to put together those picks. And it's called a top-down analysis. We look at the broad market, sector analysis, and then individual stocks. And there's risk management component to every single one. So if you have some experience in trading, like technical analysis, or you've gone through my new trader program, you can pull up those picks, follow them. Maybe you need, maybe all of your trades, they make money when they move up in price, and you want some that make money current market environment. When the market goes down, I share both. You always trade the market in front of you. So it's great for trade ideas, the educational component, because I share how I'm managing the risk. I share the fundamental aspects, which are more kind of like the financial statements, the management team, what's going on with the competitors. So it's all there, and so there's that educational component, but it's also very accessible if you know some of the basics around trading.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely helps to have somebody like you hanging your lantern going, here's the way. You said you always trade the market in front of you. Tell me a little bit about what you mean by that exactly. Like, I think I know what you mean by that, but I want to absolutely make sure that I do. And dear listener, if you were wanting to make sure too, I hope this is going to help you.
Yes. So you probably heard so much about speculation in the market. I mean, because at the end of the day, no one really knows what direction the market's going to take. And if someone claims they do, they're either like ignorant you know, of their own ignorance. Like there's just
Right.
there's no way to know for sure because there are so many variables. But that said, you can put the probabilities in your favor, which is great. But at the end of the day, we don't know, and it's speculative. So what I mean by trade the market in front of you is like right now, for example, kind of the bottom fell out, right? The market,
Right.
right? It's tumbling a bit. And some folks will go in and say, "Oh, this is the bottom." I have people texting me all week and last week. "Well, this is the bottom. I'm going to get in, at a discount. It's going to turn up." Others, they'll say, "Oh, no, no, no. The bottom's really going to fall out, and it's what we call like the march of death, right? Is going to happen." Or anyone who watches CNBC up until maybe 2 weeks ago, it's like every few weeks, "Oh, the market's hit new highs. It's going to turn. It's going to turn." But at the end of the day, on average, the market's up about 9.5% per year. Yes, it does fluctuate. But what I mean is, the market's going down, short it, right? You can short sell the market. When the market's moving on an uptrend, don't try to time the market. Don't try to call the top or the bottom. Buy into it. And while it continues that momentum, it will tell you if it's going to turn over. And then you can decide if you want to sell out of those positions or short sell the market. And there's this ebb and flow. Anytime you look at a chart, you see this ebb and flow. And so it's trading what's in front of you rather than trying to call the top or the bottom or time the market because that is such a difficult game. It's the hardest thing to do is to time the market.
So, okay, let's talk about some of the other big mistakes that new traders make so that we can not make them. So, how can we avoid some of these pitfalls? So, you've talked about not trying to time the market. What are some of the other tips that you give your members?
Yeah, so I will say, so back when I was trading full time and working with aspiring professional traders, almost every trader I spoke with said the same thing. And what they came to me to tell me was they blew out an account, they blew out their trading account, some multiple. And I used to say, well, that's your rite of passage. But at the end of the day, you never want to take, so maybe this is, trading lesson number two, never take the big loss. Manage your risk. It's so important. And you should never be no investment, no trade should ever keep you up at night, right? If you're managing your risk, that just shouldn't happen. You don't need 5 screens. All you need is what's called a stop loss order and or diversifying across different stocks and sectors to help balance out that risk. So I would say, timing the market is it's definitely a difficult game. Managing risk, I would say going in without a strategy. We talked a little bit about, having a plan. I always say, plan your trade and trade your plan. You want to stick with that. And the reason it's important is because greed and fear move the market. Like anyone can learn like, how to trade, how to place an order, how to close an order, but it's like 70 to 80% psychological. And no one talks about that. It's greed and fear. You get in, it goes against you. Oh, it'll come back. And then it goes lower and lower. You're not trading the market in front of you, it goes lower and lower and you've lost your investment. Or it starts to move your way and you're like, wow, it's high probability trade. Like it really works. I've so many traders I talk to, wow, this really does work. And they get excited, but then it's like fearful. Well, maybe I'll close it out, and take my profits. No, you need to let those suckers ride because those are going to pay for your losers. And every trade isn't going to be a winner, and you need your winners to pay for your losers. So it's that risk management. It's having a strategy, a plan. It's not making impulsive emotional decisions once you're in. It's just like you have to trust yourself, trust the process, trust your plan, trust your analysis, and follow that through.
So you talked earlier about women being better investors than men because of that diversification.
Mhm.
And you talked just a moment ago about managing the risk by having a balanced portfolio. What does that look like in practical terms? Talk me
Oh,
through what diversity looks like and what good diversification looks like in your opinion.
yeah, that's a great question, and it actually involves a couple different layers. So when I talk about diversification, since I specialize in equities or stock trading, I'm talking about don't have all of your money on Tesla or all of it in the
Right.
technology.
Well, would anybody be doing that right now? But
Well,
anyway, yeah.
absolutely no, hopefully not. Um, right, it's a
Right.
great day.
Oh,
Um, right. So you don't want it all in one stock or all in one sector. I had Personally, I've had a very difficult lesson that way early on in my trading career. So I can tell you from experience, don't let that happen. So a diversified stock portfolio will be maybe you have money in technology or healthcare, some of the sectors that tend to be a little bit more volatile. And then you also have some money maybe in what's called consumer staples, like the day-to-day, like the grocery store, or utilities, which tends to fluctuate a little bit less, or some dividend paying stocks like AT&T, for example. So you have different investments that are across different sectors. So if one kind of turns down, you have another one that ideally is staying neutral or turning up, and it balances out. On a broader level diversification, some might be thinking, well, I have a retirement account, or maybe I'm retiring soon and I don't want it all in equities. So on broader terms, you'll want a percentage in the stock market. Great, more risk, more return, right? But you'll probably also want a percentage in income producing assets, which would be like bonds that pay you, coupon regularly, or these dividend paying stocks where you have these regular income streams. And then kind of the new hot topic right now in asset management is alternative investments, which used to only be like for the ultra wealthy, but now through ETFs and other vehicles, they're more accessible. And those tend to be negatively correlated with the stock market. So stock market goes up, alts go down, and vice versa. So there are different ways to kind of be invested in a bunch of different asset types. Maybe it's classes, maybe it's sectors. So you're not, like to use the term I used before, putting it all in black.
so what do you mean when you say putting it all on black? Just for somebody who doesn't know what that means.
Oh, yes. Yes. So actually it's similar to what I what I mentioned before about, whether it's Tesla, Apple, Nvidia, you don't want to put all of your money in one stock. They call it
Right.
single stock risk. So you don't want to put all of your money into one stock and cross your fingers. It's kind of like in life, you want to diversify,
Yes. That's nice, isn't it? So
yeah.
what is your opinion about, let's say I didn't feel comfortable looking at a bunch of stocks and diversifying on my own and putting it on this and selling this and trading this. What about if I just wanted to put it in a fund that's investing in a broad range of stocks? What's your feeling about just being super conservative and sticking it in something that's really in blue chip things or whatever? That kind of old school mentality. What do you think about that?
I think that's a great starting point for beginners. I always, I did say start small, start with what you know. But maybe Lululemon, you want to put it all in there, but you're like, oh shoot, single stock risk. Um, right. So there are a couple different ways there. So I would say like what they call index funds. So there are it trades just like a ticker. So just like TSLA or AAPL, just like a ticker that you'd enter in, you can trade these. They're called funds, and it's like a basket of trades. So it's built-in diversification. And so a good starting point where many people start it could be like an S&P index fund. So BTI is one, VOO, those are really popular ones. Or even like you mentioned the Dow, or well, you mentioned blue chips, which I think the Dow. Um, so those are typical blue chip stocks, kind of the homegrown, American, big box business. Warren Buffett loves those. Great, you can trade those. There's what's called an ETF. They call it the diamonds, DIA, and it trades the Dow. So you want to trade the Dow 30, you just DIA, see what it's trading for, hit send. So so you can trade the S&P 500, the Nasdaq, the Dow. You can trade. Say there is a particular sector that you really like and you want to get into. Maybe you know it really well. There are ETFs that follow different industries, different sectors. There are assets that are pegged to inflation. If you're worried about inflation, so inflation goes up, the dollar goes down, but your financial asset goes up in value. So there's so many ways to do just that. And actually, my first trade in college was they call it the Qs. There were four back then. There's three now. QQQ, and that follows the Nasdaq because I like trading tech stocks and it's tech heavy.
Yeah. I mean, it really is like choose your own adventure. So I do want to ask you a little bit more about what you were talking about before, about the greed, the fear, these emotionally driven decisions that you're encouraging us not to make in order to weather the waves, if that's the right way to put it, of being a trader and being in the stock market and investing your money. So what are your recommendations for navigating the emotional ups and downs of the journey, where some of it's going to go your way and some of it isn't, and you're going to have wins and losses, and it's going to be, this mixed bag?
This is such an important question. So the emotions of trading. So navigating this, I mean, first and foremost, it's that strategy that I mentioned. You want to go back to. I think the other way I like to explain it, it's I call it the analogy of 10 trades. So say as an investor, right, you're diversifying. You pick 10 separate companies that you want to invest in and you've done your analysis and you say, okay, these are solid companies. I want to go in. And so you go in thinking, okay, great. All 10 should be making me money. I'm trading the market in front of me. The market's going up. I'm going to ride on that momentum. But the reality is, and I'm going to throw these numbers out here. Obviously, it can change, but the expectation that you should set for yourself out of 10 trades in a stock portfolio, is 3 to 4. You'll probably lose a little bit of money. About 3 to 5, you'll probably break even, make a little, lose a little. And there's going to be maybe one or two that skyrocket. And those are the ones that you want to ride up because those are going to pay for your losers later. So I mentioned, trust the process, trust your analysis, what you're doing. You'll have your risk management in place. But ultimately, some of the investments, they may not make money for you. So the idea, just cut those losers short and let your winners ride. So I think just having that perspective going in, that's helpful. You have your trading plan. So when something moves against you, you can just trust, okay, it'll get me out for a small loss. I'm not going to cut my winners short. And then the other thing that's helpful too is um, is analyzing your trades. So I mean, if you're actively managing an account, you'll be tracking your win loss, your batting average. Like, how am I doing? How profitable am I? And going back and seeing, okay, like what sectors am I, did I do really well in, and what was going, on at that time. And like in consulting, I'd always say process is important, but data is king. So just, and it all comes back to data. So I think, journaling your trades, having a strategy, managing your risk and trusting in that. And then just going in with a clear perspective, that everything's going to be a winner. There's going to be, undulations in the market, but that's normal and it's healthy. And as long as you do that, you'll come out ahead. But it's just having that discipline to stick to those principles.
Yeah, as you're speaking, I'm kind of thinking back to that story you told about gambling, right? That you were there. And this idea that being on the stock market feels like gambling with your life, right?
Mhm.
Your security, which is why so many people are afraid of it, right? So, how do you get people out of that gambling fear mindset and into the long term investment kind of idea about this space where you go, this is a long haul strategy,
Mm.
and there's going to be some wins, some losses, and as you say, in the over, arching scheme of things, you're going to come out ahead if you've got that strategy, you've got that plan, you're being advised by the right people. But in the beginning, as you're talking, it's sort of, I mean, I'm babbling now, but there's all these thoughts going through my head going, oh, it really is like everything else. You get better at it and more comfortable with it the more you do it.
Mm.
Is that what you would say to someone?
Yeah, I always tell my traders there's no substitute for experience. And that's why you start small.
Yeah.
But in terms of getting over that hump, because I mean, that's a great point. So many people are, I mean, I was afraid too. I didn't want to lose my shirt, and you see the flashing lights, and it can be intimidating. So I always start at square one, and that's the terminology. Because I think like not I mean, not to be cliche, but like knowledge is power. And I think just understanding, what's bullish and bearish, what is a share of a stock, like what am I buying and selling, it's not a share, what does that mean. um so I always start with like what's volatility, what's liquidity, and like why do I care. So I think just demystifying some of that terminology and understanding, like, okay, like I kind of get the rules of the road. And then kind of the next step, it's like a stock chart. Okay, I see the stock chart. Like what does it mean? How do I read that? And so it's breaking it down. Like each company, it has its own behavior, and talking through that. And then in terms of the fear, like I don't want to lose my shirt. That's where I have a whole class on risk management. So like I mentioned, I'm a CPA, accountant by trade. So I'm going to teach the risk management where you're not losing sleep at night, where every single trade you put on, you're out, a small loss that moves against you, and a tears in the beer on to the next, and then you move on and you continue. So a lot of it is just understanding the terminology, what you're looking at, until you feel comfortable, and you'll place that first trade. Some of my traders start in what's called a paper trading account or a demo account, where the interface, the brokerage platform, it looks exactly like it would if you're trading a real share stock, but it's called paper money. You just set, I want, to trade $50,000. It's kind of fake money, and you place the trade, and then you can track and see how it does. But you're not risking
Wait
it.
a second. This is life changing. Hold
Mhm.
on a second. So you can kind of practice with monopoly money. and just see whether your instincts serve you and kind of practice without actually having to spend any real money?
Yes. Yep.
Wait, how do I not know about this?
Yeah.
Listener, are you having the biggest aha moment right now? Because this is life changing. Okay, I need to know more about this. How do you set one of these up?
Yes. So, well, first I'll caveat not all brokerages offer this, but many do. And so when you open your brokerage account, oftentimes you'll have your live trading account, and then next to it is a paper, what they call paper trading account or simulated trading. And
Oh,
like
that's what I know it as.
simulated.
Okay, simulated trading. Sorry, go ahead.
Yes, yes, they're synonymous, or a demo trading account. See, it's the
Okay,
terminology,
yes.
right? It always comes back to that. So paper trading, demo, or simulated trading.
Okay.
And so you log in. So some brokerages, for example, you'll see the little login modal, and there'll be a toggle. It'll say like real money or paper money. And you just click paper money. And then you log in, and then you have, you can set it to whatever you want. Say, 50, or maybe you have $5,000 to invest. I'm going to set it at $5,000. And I'm thinking about getting into, Nike, you know. And so you look at the chart, and then you place your trade, you say how many shares, and then you follow it. I know when I started, I was following every tick, like religiously, and you follow it, and you get a sense, for it, and maybe you want to. Then you learn how to close the trade. I remember that was my fear. I placed my trade. I'm like, okay, am I going to be able to close it? Closing the trade and looking at it'll track your profit and loss statement, your P&L. So you'll see all of that right in there. So you can kind of get your feet wet. Because like I said, I've placed, trades backwards before. And you'd rather make those mistakes on a paper trading account, ideally,
Yes.
simulated trading.
So when you say closing the trade, for somebody who doesn't know what that means, when you say, I wasn't sure whether I was how to close the trade, what does that mean?
Yes, yes. So when you place a trade, so say you find a company and you say, I want to buy, I want to be invested in that. I'm going to buy a share. So what you'll do is you'll log onto your brokerage platform, you put in the ticker, whatever that is, so Nike, to go with that example, NKE,
Yep.
and then you put number of shares, so let's just say one, and there'll be a big green buy button on most of these platforms. So you hit buy, and now you're invested in Nike. Amazing. But say, remember, we're trading the market in front of us. So say it has, it's moving up, 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 and your account value is going up, up, up. But then it starts turning over. It starts losing value, and you think, no, I don't know if I want to be invested in Nike anymore. I want to get into, Nvidia, into, an AI stock.
Yep.
You want to get out of that investment. So you want to close the trade to get out of that investment. And
So
so
basically sell it.
you sell it.
It's the same thing.
It's the
Okay.
same thing. Yep. Same thing. So,
All
yep.
right.
So it's the
Okay.
order, except it's a big red button this time.
Yeah, right.
And then you're out of it.
No, I'm just loving all of this because again, I just see the real value in doing this in community. It's what's coming up for me. And I just love what you've created with these classes and this membership and women supporting other women and also feeling like you're not in this alone. Now, some people may like to do that and just have it be their private solitary thing. But then there's other people who may want to talk it through with other people that might be in a similar situation. And so I'm really loving what you're providing. So I want to get inside of that a little bit, if that's okay. So there's so many different ways that we can immerse ourselves in the trading with Diana world. So just talk me through that. Seeing as we've been going through the trading for beginners, let's just start with the basics. How can we start with the basics in terms of getting into your world?
Yep. Yeah. So my flagship, so I mentioned I want to reach those who are completely new to the space and bring them in. So my flagship, if you will, it's my new trader program, right? And it teaches everything from trading terminology to, like I said before, reading that stock chart, goes deeper into, the emotions in trading. Like, how do I pick a stock? I teach exactly how I make my stock selections, the exact methodology? How do I manage my risk? How do I place, and now that we know, close the trade? How do
Yeah.
I do that, right? Like, what are the tactics of it? And so it's very personalized. When I started my business, I thought, one-on-one I thought most people would think, okay, one-on-one, privately, ask my questions. What I've learned, it's people, to your point, they like to learn in groups. So my
They
clients,
love
I'm teaching couples,
community.
I'm
We
teaching
love
workshops.
community and
Yep.
support 100%. It's delicious.
It's it's
I
it's
love community. It's so good. So you were, I mean, I know you still do one-to-one
yeah.
consultations and that is still an option, which is wonderful. How soon was it when you started trading with Diana that you realized that this community piece of it was where it was at for the majority of women?
It's when I started, so every client of mine, I always meet with them before to understand, what their goals are and kind of talk through any challenges that they've had with investing and to see if it's the right fit. And it was through those conversations that I learned about like the limiting beliefs that we talked about before, and it was incredibly eye-opening. And many of those discussions turned, emotional, and so I think that was the initial take. And then my first clients, it was a couple. And I remember the husband, at the end of our first class, he just said, thank you for not making me feel dumb when I ask a question. And I said, of course not.
I
Like,
know that's the thing I love the most about you. Yeah, you just meet every single person where they're at.
yeah, yes. And that's what I'm continuing to do. So I have the new trader program, but now, I've learned that, I mean, there's so many like incredibly talented, female business owners here in Boston. So now I'm teaching live workshops. I'm doing hourly coaching for the men that reach out and they want to learn and like this,
Oh,
I'll
so
call
it's not
it.
just women.
No, no,
Oh,
it's
male listeners.
yeah, yes, yes,
Great
and it's men
news.
that
Yes.
when I was learning how to trade, they had the same trading coach, and they say, "I wanna leave them and come to you." And, so, it's that, or it's, that there's the stock pick. So I'm always looking at ways to meet people where they are because I wanna help as many people as I can because I realize that, like, this just doesn't exist. I mean,
No, there's not enough of
and
it. That is for sure, which is why it's so exciting to be talking to you and hearing about what you're doing. I love it. Okay, so we can come in if you're in the Boston area, you can do live workshops, live group workshops, and then the trading program. How can we access you online for all of the international listeners and people all over the world? How can we enter your world that way?
yes. So, and I work with women actually all over the world right now. So on my website, which is just tradingwithdiana.com, you can book a free consultation with me. And happy to go over, but that's where we'll talk about your goals and what you're looking for. And we can talk about, is it hourly coaching? Is it the new trader program? Are you an active trader? What's the right fit for where you are? So through my website, you can schedule time with me one-on-one, and then we can talk about virtual classes. And it can be just you and me. It can be small group sessions virtually. I teach my new trader program through small groups, which is probably the most popular right now. And then, yes, and then for those local, I'm doing some more live in person.
And then the in-person workshops, yeah. And then in terms of the blog, I mean, there's just so many great nuggets there as well. So how often are you updating that? I mean, my goodness, there is so much conversation around the, speculation. I mean, there's always speculation about the stock market, right? But because we're obviously in a completely new world with what's going on in the United States, but also around the world,
Mm.
um, yeah, this is who knows what's going to be happening, right? With the trade wars and stuff like that. So I imagine that the demand, or I said differently, the fear is just palpable right now. The uncertainty and the need for what you do is even greater.
Yes, yes, my phone. Yes, I'm definitely getting texts. And so the blog is monthly. And I also started a free newsletter and social media presence where I
Yeah,
have.
your newsletter's amazing. I'm on it.
Oh,
It's great.
I'm so glad you love it. Well, you know why
Yeah.
I started that is as I was having these discovery calls, I was meeting with women who their partners, they didn't believe in coaching. They said, get on YouTube like me, trade these, marijuana stocks, it'll be fine. And right. And I said, I'm going to get you there. Like we're going to get you there. So I started this monthly newsletter on, so every Monday it goes out and it'll talk about like what trade, were you overwhelmed with trading platforms? Like I know I was, but these are the steps you can take. And here's some to, maybe look into. And I share some personal stories as well on there, just so you know that you're not alone. I mean,
Yeah.
trading can be investing, it can be very lonely. And then on my social media, I just started this weekly Q&A with Diana. So those questions that I hear on the calls, or it's like every time I leave my apartment, strangers, I mean, it's like every time. And the questions that I hear, the struggles and challenges people have, I have a Q&A. I've busted every Wednesday. I send it out. Every Sunday, I send out a market outlook. Like this is what's going to move the market this week. And it's a
Yeah.
bridged version of my paid newsletter. But I'm trying to find so many ways to reach folks, whether, yeah, it's through the blog or through the social media presence. And then if you want to go deeper, of course, set up a call with me. I'd love to talk to you.
Oh, no, I love it. I love it. And we'll give a shout out to Steph who introduced us because yeah, she's a very savvy businesswoman. So you have got people, in all sectors of the business world talking about how extraordinary you are. So, listener, oh my goodness, enter Diana's world because it is so incredible. And just to be able to get that consultation with you is just extraordinary. Um, just the high level knowledge you have is just amazing. So I am just sitting here feeling so grateful for the fact that you went out on your own and that we now have access to you, which is so amazing. So we've got all of Diana's links in the show notes. So please head over to tradingwithdiana.com because it's just such a great thing. And definitely get on the newsletter because it's fabulous. I'm kind of addicted to it. So I always close every episode with the same question, which is for somebody that has a dream in their heart and doesn't feel like they have what it takes to make it happen, what would you say to them?
Oh, I just got goosebumps. So I always say that there's a saying, and anyone who knows me has heard me say this before, and it's the greatest antidote to fear is action.
Yes.
And so, what I would say is, I strongly believe that all of us have a bit of an analogy, but all of us have this like seed planted in us. And it's up to us to dig in and figure out kind of what that is. We all have something very unique to bring to this world. And some people know when they're, 8 years old learning about compound interest. Some people know, later in life. And if you're fortunate to, to find that, hold on to that and like exploit the hell out of it. It's your calling. And I would say, take the first step. And that could be, you don't have to quit your job, turn your life, upside down. You don't have to do that. But no matter how small it is, it could be a conversation with your partner. It could be doing some research. It could be, laying out, writing down, these are my options on moving forward and evaluating, okay, what makes the most sense for where I am? But as far as we know, we have one spin around the wheel, so to speak. So if you know that, like I said before, like I feel like inherently, like we just know. Like if you know that or have an inkling, you need to act on it. So I would say, take that first step. Take that first step. Find out what you want, and then like find the way to get it. It's the competitive find the way to get it. Like, and you do that by taking action. It's not, talking about it. It's taking that first step. when I left corporate that first time, um, I was so nervous. I was 10 years into my career. It was my identity. I made it my identity. And I remember there's this female business author, and I was obsessed with her book. I flew out to New York to meet her, and she would say things like invent option C or go for nervous. Right, that was my mantra before big presentation. Go for nervous. And she said, jump and a net will appear. And I took that first leap, into learning how to trade. I left, my corporate career. And 9 months in, I met the partners in Vegas. They hired me for their internal team. I started working with traders, and ultimately I started my own business where now I get, now it's on my terms. I'm doing it my way. And the net did appear, and I never could have planned it that way. So, take the risk. If it needs to be calculated, put, budget, whatever that means to you. But, like you owe it to yourself to do it. I've done it, and it's scary. And, sometimes you feel very exposed, like you're not going to be in your comfort zone. But I feel like that's where the good things happen. And so you just have to take that first step.
Yes, yes, feeling very exposed
Mm.
can feel scary, but it also can feel very exhilarating and freeing at the same time. It's just all a mixed bag. Now I have to know who the author was that changed your life, that you
Oh,
flew to New York to meet.
Sally Hogshead, which was her maiden name, but she kept it because she knew it was, so unique. And her
Yes.
background, she started an advertising firm, which was age 27, very successful. And then a recession hit. She lost everything, and so she created this book called Radical Careering, like 100, truths. And I at the time, a colleague of mine, she and we were able to get funding from our firm. We were in our early 20s and flew out to New York, shook her hand. And I mean, some of those mantras in the book, I mean, it was like my Bible early on in my career, the invent option C, as a consultant, there's going to be two sides. Well, what haven't we thought about? What can we create? Just like in entrepreneurship, you're creating something out of thin air. It's, on faith and this, just like trusting yourself.
Yeah.
And anyway, so yeah, it was just pivotal book for me.
Oh, well, Sally, we are giving a shout out to you, isn't it? It's so lovely, when you put your work out there and just to know the flow on effect that you're having in people's lives.
Mm.
How you're changing other people's lives with your impact. And that's all of us. We're all changing other people's lives with what we do and say and what we act on. So thank you for the way that you're empowering women with their financial freedom, their financial literacy, their financial futures, and financial confidence is what you do more than anything, I think, which is just such a gift. So thank you so much for the way that you show up in the world. I am so excited for trading with Diana to just explode into the stratosphere. Oh, isn't she lovely? So many great takeaways. The big one is the importance of financial literacy and independence, that money gives us freedom and choices, and the importance of taking control of our finances with that abundance mentality, regardless of how much money we have. It was interesting to note that women are better investors than men, and it has to do with strategy, risk management, and diversification, and that opening a brokerage account is actually really easy, and that most have a $0 account minimum, and that you can trade fractional shares, and you don't need a lot of money to get started and don't need to engage in high risk investments. A lot of great practical tips, that there's no substitution for experience. Don't trade anything you can't afford to lose. Think about how much you're willing to invest and start small, and that no investment should keep you up at night. She kept talking about the importance of formulating your investment strategy, and she's got a lot of tips for this on her website and in her programs. She kept talking about trading the market in front of you. that it's impossible to time the market no matter how much experience you have. I loved the phrase plan your trade and trade your plan, that greed and fear move the market, that it's 70 to 80% psychological. I really loved the analogy of the 10 trades, this strategy of picking 10 separate companies to invest in and expecting that 3 to 4 will lose a little bit of money, 3 to 5 will break even or make a little or lose a little, and 1 or 2 will skyrocket. And so you cut the losers short, you let your winners ride to pay for your losers. And it was a great tip to journal your trades and have that strategy, keep managing your risk, and then go in all the time when you're investing and trading with a very clear perspective. When she said that process is important, but data is king, that really resonated with me, that there'll be undulations in the market, but that's normal and healthy. And you'll come out ahead if you have the discipline to stick to the principles that she was talking about. It was great to just be reminded that the option of doing a paper trading account, using a demo or simulated account to just practice getting your feet wet and trading without real money or risk, that's how you can gain confidence. That's a really, really great tip. And aside from all of the trading tips, there were just so many great quotes, that you are defined by what you say no to. And perception is reality. You either take control of the situation or you get out. And often you don't regret making the change. What you regret is not making it sooner. Oh, and when she was talking about fear, that the greatest antidote to fear is action. Oh, that really resonated with me. Find out what you want, figure out how to get it. And you start by taking that first step. I loved the option C approach. Think of the thing that you haven't thought of to get what you want and go for nervous. I liked her take on that, you always hear, leap and the net will appear. But her thing was, yes, leap, but the risk needs to be calculated. But you owe it to yourself to take that risk and get out of your comfort zone, because that's where the good things happen. Oh, yes, to that. Definitely check out the wealth of resources at tradingwithdiana.com. Diana's got a great newsletter, a free guide. She does personal coaching. You can book a free consultation with her, which is an amazing option. She does group workshops. That was interesting what she was saying about, we think of investing as a solitary activity, but she's actually found that people prefer to learn in groups, which correlates to the rest of life, doesn't it? Why would that be any different? That we get satisfaction out of doing things in groups. So yeah, if you're in the Boston area, you could definitely hit her up for one of those live workshops, but she also does it online as well. All right. Her new trader program is pretty extraordinary, right? She teaches you everything from trading terminology to reading the stock charts to the exact methodology that she uses to pick stocks, how you manage risk, and how you place and close trades. Basically just a trading 101 course, right? It's really, really great. So I'm just really interested in the conversation that we've been having the last couple of episodes about our money templates and our relationship with money, and what does that trigger in us, and what scares us about it. So I'm just really interested in hearing from you. DM me on social media or post in the Facebook group. What scares you about money? I've certainly been thinking about this the last couple of weeks, and I just be really interested in having that conversation. So, yeah, let me know in the Facebook group.
I want to hear about your It Has to Be Me story. So head on over to ithastobeme.com/stories to share it in our free community. You can also join the conversations we're having about this episode and others. I'm Tess Masters. Join me next week and we'll dive inside another great story to help us go from dreaming to doing.